Pete Hegseth wasn't ready for what Senator Chris Murphy brought to the table. In a hearing that was supposed to be routine, the conversation exploded into a full-blown clash over secrecy, taxpayer money, and double standards at the highest levels of government. Billions of dollars, foreign gifts, and the shadow of January 6th all collided in one of the most tense exchanges Congress has seen in months. And the way Murphy pressed Hegseth left viewers stunned. From the very beginning, Murphy wasted no time cutting straight to the heart of the issue. He asked a simple question about the mysterious plane gifted from Qatar. Was there a signed agreement with the Qatari government?
You're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. I wanted to build on some of the questions that Senator Schatz was asking, just to try to build a fact predicate for some of the tough spending decisions we're going to have to make here. Just to confirm, I heard you say with respect to the gift of the plane from Qatar that we do not yet have a signed MOU with the government of Qatar. Is that right?
Correct. We're in the process of working through that.
And did you also say we don't have a signed contract with the company that is going to do the work? Or did you say that we have a contract, you're just not willing to disclose the terms?
The terms should not be disclosed of anything related to an aircraft of this type.
So in 2018, when the contract was signed with Boeing to do the upgrades or the new contracts for Air Force One, the terms of that contract were disclosed. They were made public. In fact, it was the Trump administration that issued a press release giving the total as $3.9 billion. Are you saying this time around, even after you sign the contract, you're not going to make public any of the terms of the contract?
I wasn't involved in that previous administration decision, but we're happy to take a look.
The Air Force testified before the House that that contract would likely deliver the new Air Force Ones by the 2028 timeframe. It doesn't stand to reason that you will be able to retrofit the plane from Qatar much sooner than 2028. So I'm trying to understand what the gap is that we're trying to fill. If this contract ends up being $500 million and the gap only ends up being 6 months, that doesn't sound like a wise investment for this committee to make.
Senator, I would defer to the expertise of the Air Force as far as timing of modifications and when that would happen, but there's also been delay after delay after delay on the Boeing side, so I don't know that's a firm fixed date yet, unfortunately, can be counted on.
So obviously the underlying question here is what is going to happen to the plane at the end of Trump's presidency. The president said on May 12th that this plane would be transferred to his presidential library at the end of his term. Is that your understanding of what is going to happen to this plane?
The president said that. That's my understanding, although I would look at what comes out in the MOU.
But why would we ask the American taxpayer to spend upwards of $1 billion on a plane that would then only be used for a handful of months and then transferred directly to the president? That doesn't sound like a wise use of taxpayer dollars.
A lot of the capabilities, as you know, Senator, of that particular platform are and should remain classified. So there are reasons why you might modify, even for a short period of time, an aircraft to ensure the safety and security of the President of the United States.
But when do you believe that those upgrades would be made? How long would the president have it before it got transferred to his personal possession?
That would be a determination of the Air Force that would take hold of it and make those modifications within whatever time window they believe gets it to the place where it need to be.
Yeah, I think this is extraordinary, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about a pretty massive investment of appropriations dollars into a plane that the Secretary is saying is currently planned to be transferred personally to the President. There's a lot of other pending needs that we need to fund. This would seem to be low on the list.
The answer no. Was there a signed contract with the company responsible for doing the retrofit work? Again, no. Everything was vague, hidden, and deliberately shielded from public view. For an aircraft supposedly tied to the safety of the president, the lack of paperwork raised red flags everywhere. And Murphy didn't stop there. He pointed out that back in 2018, under the Trump administration, when Boeing was awarded a massive $3.9 billion contract for Air Force One upgrades, the deal was announced in a press release. The number was made public. Americans were allowed to see the price tag. So why, Murphy demanded, was this new deal shrouded in secrecy? Why would taxpayers be asked to bankroll an aircraft when no one could even see the details? The refusal to disclose the terms didn't just look suspicious, it felt like a deliberate attempt to hide the truth. But that wasn't the only troubling piece. Murphy pressed on, asking why this deal was even necessary in the first place. The timing didn't add up. Reports suggested that the Boeing contract was already slated to deliver the next generation of Air Force One by 2028. So what gap was this Qatar plane supposed to fill? At most it would cover a window of a few months, and yet the retrofit was estimated to cost upwards of $500 million. $500 million for 6 months of use. Murphy called it out for what it was: an absurd, reckless investment that didn't make sense for the American people. And what Murphy revealed next took the debate to another level. He highlighted what everyone else was already thinking: if Trump only had a few months left in office, why would so much money be poured into a plane he might barely use? The answer was uncomfortable. Once his presidency ended, the plane could be transferred into his personal possession. Imagine that: a taxpayer-funded luxury jet, upgraded under the guise of security, parked in Trump's presidential library as a vanity exhibit. Billions spent not for the security of the nation, but for a personal trophy to cement a political legacy. The absurdity was hard to ignore. At a time when every budget decision matters, this looked less like a national security investment and more like a vanity project. Murphy's line of questioning sliced straight into the heart of the issue. Was this about keeping the president safe or about indulging presidential ego? Because if the timeline was correct, the American people weren't protecting democracy. They were paying for a billionaire's personal display piece. But this wasn't just about money. It was about the blurred lines of privilege that seem to follow powerful leaders wherever they go. When pressed, Hegseth tried to argue that modifications to the aircraft were essential for security, even if only for a short period of time. But that explanation fell flat. These so-called classified safety measures often doubled as luxury perks. Every administration claimed the changes were necessary. Every administration insisted on secrecy. And every time, the upgrades just happened to leave presidents with taxpayer-funded symbols of prestige long after their terms ended. This was bigger than one plane. It was about accountability. If the government can't be transparent about how billions are being spent, what else are they hiding? Murphy made it clear that this wasn't just sloppy budgeting, it was a systemic problem. A problem where security is used as a shield to block scrutiny, and where taxpayers are forced to foot the bill without knowing who truly benefits. And when the questioning shifted toward priorities, things got explosive. Murphy reminded the room that the country was facing real crises: public safety challenges, underfunded communities, struggling families. And yet billions of dollars were being diverted to retrofit a luxury aircraft that might barely serve its supposed purpose. This should be low on the list, Murphy said, his voice dripping with frustration. Because the truth was obvious: while ordinary Americans were fighting to make ends meet, Washington was burning cash on a presidential plaything. And then came the most cutting exchange of the hearing. Murphy pivoted to something much deeper than planes or budgets. He raised the double standards that Americans had seen play out in real time. When peaceful protesters called for justice, they were met with overwhelming force, tear gas, and arrests. But when violent rioters stormed the Capitol on January 6, many of them walked away with pardons or leniency. Even worse, some were hailed as patriots. And now the same administration was pushing to pour billions into its own luxuries, while ordinary citizens were punished for demanding accountability. The hypocrisy was jarring. Unlimited funds for presidential perks, selective mercy for violent allies, brutal crackdowns on critics. Murphy's questions exposed the government's twisted priorities for everyone to see. But even when pressed on the Capitol attack, Hegseth's answers raised more questions than they solved. Murphy asked him directly, did he support the decision to deploy the National Guard to defend Congress on January 6? Hegseth hesitated, dodged, and finally claimed he only supported Trump's request, not Congress's protection, not the defense of lawmakers under attack, just Trump. The contradiction couldn't be clearer. The same man who deployed forces to protect ICE agents in Los Angeles refused to defend the seat of democracy itself. It was an answer that exposed everything Murphy had been driving at: loyalty to power over loyalty to principle, protection for privilege, not for the people. And once again the taxpayers were the ones funding the entire charade. By the end of the exchange the picture was undeniable. Washington's spending priorities weren't about protecting the nation. They were about protecting egos, shielding allies, and covering tracks. Billions disappeared into classified contracts and retrofitted jets while Americans were left with scraps. And the same leaders who failed to defend democracy on January 6 now wanted credit for calling in reinforcements after the damage was already done. Senator Murphy's questioning didn't just reveal inconsistencies, it exposed a system rigged against accountability, a government that spends without oversight, a leadership that rewards loyalty, not integrity, and a defense policy that looks more like damage control than real protection. So the question remains, are taxpayer dollars being used to protect democracy or to protect privilege? That's what Americans were left asking after this hearing. And if you thought this was controversial, just wait until you see what happened in the next hearing. It makes this clash look tame. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories Washington doesn't want you to hear.